Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. I hope you guys are all having a great day so far. So today we're actually building a very futuristic and modern beach house in Sulani on one of the 30 by 30 lots, which is one of the waterfront lots that came with this world. And I just felt like it was kind of like necessary to build in one of these lots for now, because like as we're nearing towards summer and it's pretty much here, I just felt like it was kind of necessary to create a lot more like tropical and resort like builds for you guys, which I actually have started a few weeks ago, where I actually built this very large luxurious beach house in Tartosa on one of these like very sandy lots, which I really do like the way it looks. And I also wanted to build one just here as well, primarily because I just really like the way the waterfront lots really look. And despite like not being able to like naturally add a swimming pool in, I did obviously like find a few workarounds for it, such as like utilizing a mod and stuff we will get onto later on in the video. And although the house relatively does look quite boxy, I feel like it really does resonate really well with like these typical modern like beachfront homes that you would find in real life. So yeah, that was kind of like my main like inspiration and goal when building this build, as well as like some 3D architecture renders and stuff like that that I saw throughout Pinterest and Instagram, which I really do like the way they look. And I was kind of like struggling to pull that off in The Sims as well, because like obviously like simple shapes in The Sims doesn't really look that dynamic, nor does it look that interesting. So I feel like I was able to sort of like pull that off with this build, if that makes sense. And we'll see that throughout the build as like we progress with like how I actually like make some changes to make some parts of the house look a bit more dynamic and stuff. And what I meant by like the house looking a bit futuristic in the sense that like most of this build, especially like the front, like the second floor of this entire build, it is relatively like floating off of like the sides of like the main structure of the build, which I thought looked quite interesting. And having no supports to support it like below it, I just felt like that kind of just like looked a bit more like interesting and futuristic, if that makes sense. And we primarily have like a lot of focus on like the back garden area of this home, primarily because it is facing towards the water, and we have like a lot more like features as well as like a lot more space to work with, because I didn't want to put a lot of the lot into the water. I still wanted to remain as like a land sort of like home, but I just wanted to have like sort of like some part of the house inside of the water, such as like this nice deck that we're seeing so far. And we actually cover the area around this entire house with like rocks and stuff, with the environment that it comes in, just to like make it look a bit more like realistic and as if it like fits in, if that makes sense. I feel like a lot of like rocks and stuff around like the coastal area of this build doesn't really make that much sense, so I wanted to try to like place it in some areas that I feel like would have made sense and it would be like quite logical, rather than making it look like it was like placed artificially, if that makes sense. And we're actually using a lot of these like long vertical lines that came from Eco Lifestyle, which I honestly really do like the way they look. I feel like they really do work well in a lot of these like modern builds that I build. And I feel like it just really tied in the entire build together, because as you guys will see like towards the end of the video, I actually utilize those throughout like pretty much like the entire home. But I just feel like it looks really nice and really dynamic. I just feel like it really does change the way like a flat wall looks, for example, you know, rather than having like a plain white wall, plain black wall. I just feel like adding a bit more like details and stuff here and there makes it look a lot more dynamic in comparison to leaving it into like some sort of like flat color or whatnot, because I feel like a lot of flat colors don't really look that great in The Sims for some reason. I don't know why, but especially like these like plain simple like white colors, even if it's for like the flooring or like the walls, it just doesn't really look that interesting to look at. And like since like a lot of these like reference images have a lot of these like plain white simple walls, you can't really replicate that in The Sims and make it look good. You kind of just like have to really work for it, if that makes sense, to like actually make it look good, because there's no standalone like wallpaper that like flashes or like looks white enough or bright enough. And by using those vertical lines, I feel like it really does help with like adding a bit more detail onto the walls as well as like on the windows as well, which makes it look a bit more interesting in my opinion. And as you guys just saw like a few seconds ago, I was actually not able to place a swimming pool onto this lot. So the way I managed to work around that was by using Twisted Mexie's mod, which allows you to utilize swimming pools on these like waterfront lots, which you're actually not allowed to do originally. And I believe if you guys do not have this mod installed in your game, but you try to download this lot, end up like in a loading screen, like an infinite loading screen. So in order to avoid that for all of you guys, I will make sure to include a swimming pool version as well as like a non-swimming pool version on the gallery, so that you guys can pick and choose if you guys want to download it with the mod installed or not. But I'm not 100% sure if you do run into any issues or not if you don't have the mod, but I believe that, like, just to be safe, I'm going to upload both versions just in case you guys decide to like not utilize the swimming pool, or if you guys aren't using the mod, such as like if you're on a console or whatnot and you can't use mods, you guys can just like easily download it without having to worry about your game having any issues, if that makes sense. And we have a lot of greenery in this build as well. Despite being on a waterfront lot, I just really like the way the greenery actually looks throughout like the entire build. So we have it on quite a lot of the balconies, as well as like on the first floor, with like a nice sunken area where we're going to add some seating later on. And we're pretty much like just adding a lot of like these like nice simple black framed windows throughout like the entire build, which I just feel like looks so nice, and it just always works well with like these like very nice and modern builds. And just to like make it a bit more interesting and break up the space a little bit more, I added some like 2x1 walls that kind of like poke out from like the straight walls, just to like make it a bit more like interesting and dynamic rather than like keeping it all flat and boring, if that makes sense. And I actually utilized the eco lifestyle sliding door, which I honestly struggle to use because despite it looking really modern and simple and like pretty much like my style, I still find it quite tricky to use it, mainly because frame colors that it comes in is quite difficult to work with because they're very muted. So we're using these very dark frame black windows that came from Eco Lifestyle, but the doors don't match the colors of the windows, so it doesn't really make that much sense. So I don't know why they did that, but yeah, despite it not coming in a lot more like darker colors or whatnot, and despite it not really matching, I still actually went with it because I just feel like it really worked well, especially with like that first floor like sliding door area. I just feel like it really worked perfectly there, so I didn't want to change it and add anything else to it. Usually I would go back and just add like this base game like black window framed one, which does really work well with the other windows, but I just decided to go with this like sliding door because I just feel like it made the most sense, especially for like this like nice resort style home anyway. And yeah, and I also tried to add these like very nice like glass railings throughout like the entire house, such as like on the balconies as well as like on the first floor around like the entire like perimeter of like the actual build. But I actually ended up removing them because I didn't like the way they looked. I kind of feel like they kind of just like didn't make the house look any more interesting than it already was. I feel like it looked a lot more like nicer and sleeker when I didn't have it, so instead I just like decided to remove them. And I feel like since safety is not really that big of a thing in The Sims and it doesn't really exist, I just felt like it didn't really matter if I had it or not. So for stylistic reasons I just removed it. And we're also utilizing a lot of these like monochrome furniture pieces for the exterior of the home, which I really do like the way they look. But this is actually not the same for the interior of the build, so we actually go for a lot more colors and we have a lot more like themes within the actual like interior of the build, if that makes sense. So but on the exterior I kind of like kept it to like a more minimalistic theme and like create like a lot more of like a simple environment, if that makes sense. So you would see a lot more like black and white accents and furniture pieces scattered throughout the entire build. And I also utilized a lot of these like Dream Home Decorator modular furniture pieces to create a lot of these like nice seating areas for the outside, which I haven't actually really utilized. Usually I just put like some nice like sun lounges there or whatnot, but I just felt like it looked kind of interesting to incorporate, especially because these Dream Home Decorator modular pieces really do look quite sleek and stuff. So, and obviously as that was kind of like the main goal with this build, I feel like it kind of just like made sense to utilize these furniture pieces. But and I also recently started using this like circular shade, which I don't really use, but I just feel like it kind of just like looked nice, and I kind of felt like it really did like match the area a lot more than the rectangular ones, because I do really use the other ones quite often. So I felt like it was kind of just like a nice change to utilize these. Although I don't really like the color of like the actual like stands that these come in, I still ended up like using it just because like I just like the way the umbrella part of it actually looked. And I wanted to add some sort of like nice enclosure to this like grassy area on this like this balcony sort of situation, but nothing was really working out. So I just sized down these like very small like hedge sort of like stuff and placed it throughout like the entire green area of this entire like balcony area, just to like sort of like cover it up, instead of adding like these like huge glass balcony stuff that we already mentioned earlier. Didn't really look that nice. I tried adding on the first floor once again, but I just felt like it just really didn't look nice, so instead I just like left it empty as it was originally, because I just felt like it looked a lot better. And we also changed a few of the colors for the exterior as well as like on the roofing, such as like adding a bit more of like a darker gray accent for like the middle of the roofing, as well as like a lot of like bits that like poke out from the house that have a lot more of like a black concrete sort of like wallpaper texture to it, because I just feel like it looked a lot more interesting and dynamic rather than keeping it all like one simple plain color. And I was trying to utilize as much of the space possible because we already have so little to work with. I didn't want to like waste any of the space that we were working with, if that makes sense. And moving on to the actual interior part of this build, we're actually going with a very nice living room in one of the corners of the home. We're utilizing one of my favorite seats from the book nook kit, and I just really like the way this one looks in particular, because I feel like although it looks very modern and like simple looking, it still ties in well with like the room, and you can actually make it look very interesting, mainly because of like the accent colors that come from the pillows from itself. So I was able to actually match it really well with like the TV unit, which I create with like the kitchen counters, as well as like the very nice coffee table that I don't really use, but I just really like the way the colors looked on it, as well as the rocking chair that comes in like this like very nice orange swatch color that I feel like worked really well and matched with the color that we were going with the actual like book nook kit seating area, as well as like the wallpapers that I had going throughout like this entire main area of this house, which is like very vibrant and open. So despite using quite a lot of like dark colors such as like this like dark blue, I feel like the colors still do stand out quite well, especially like the orange and the bright blue that I have going towards like the other side of the home, which I thought looked a lot nicer and really worked well with like this entire home overall. And despite using quite a lot of monochromatic colors such as like the grey wooden flooring and like the black appliances, as well as like the white counters, I feel like the accent colors that come from the other objects around it, I feel like really does make up for like this entire kitchen and makes it look a lot more interesting than it really is, especially with like the nice wooden shelving units that we have going throughout like the entire like small kitchen area, which I thought looked quite interesting, especially when it's like cluttered up and stuff. And I really do like the way the counter chairs really look, because I feel like it really does tie in well with like all the objects that we pretty much have utilized within this build, such as the oranges from the actual like shelving unit, as well as like from the seating area, as well as the actual like accent wall that we have on the TV unit, as well as like the blue seating aspect of it, which comes from like the pillows, as well as like the overall like wallpapers that we have going throughout like the entire home, which is relatively blue, which I feel like really does tie in well together, and it works quite well in my opinion. And I also utilize quite a few of the login rewards objects, such as like the bin, as well as like the pillow, which I feel like are really good objects in my opinion, especially the bin for the gameplay, obviously, as it gives you money. But I just feel like that pillow, as we're seeing right now, is really versatile, and you can actually create a lot of stuff with it, especially if you have the tool mod. I feel like when you get the chance to like rotate it and like place it in several different locations, I feel like it's really cool that you really do have like the opportunity to do a lot of stuff with that pillow in my opinion. And I tried to create this like sort of like nice like entrance rack sort of situation where you could just like place your stuff in, or like before you leave, it's kind of just like a small little area where you can just like place your clutter, just like adding a little bit more like realism in my opinion. And we have a nice simple bathroom that is kind of like off to the side of this entire like main room, and we have a very nice simple dining area, which I was kind of like struggling to pick the actual like dining seats for this actual like dining area, because I didn't know what to go with. Initially I was thinking of something like this, but I feel like the dark blue was a bit too dark for my liking, and it wasn't really matching with anything else, and I feel like it was standing out a little bit too much, because I feel like a lot of the colors that we actually have going throughout like the entire home is relatively muted, and it doesn't really have a lot of patterns on it. So I just feel like this one didn't really work out that well, so instead I had to resort to something else. I did try a bunch of different options, such as like these ones, as well as I believe the decor to the max one, but none of them were really working out as much as the dream home decorator one, because obviously that one does match it the best since it does come from the same pack. But I'm just going around like the entire main area of the house now and just adding a bunch of different like clutter pieces, as well as like a lot of foliage and stuff, just to make it look a bit more like lively. And I did go around and replace some of the saucer lights that I had throughout like the entire build with different light fixtures, as well as like different objects that emit light, because I just felt like it made a lot more sense to utilize a bunch more like objects to make the room or like a certain area look a bit more interesting than it really is, such as like that geometric lighting that I have going throughout like the entire like living area, as well as like the dining area, which I do actually utilize in quite a lot of like the bedrooms as well. And this is one of the main bathrooms that we have for this house, which is relatively simple, but I just really like the way it looks, because it has that very nice huge window that looks out into like this like very nice like tropical view. Despite not being towards the water, I still feel like it looks really interesting, and I would really love if I had some sort of like experience like that in real life as well. I just feel like that looks really interesting in my opinion. And yeah, I just kept it like very nice and simple, nothing fancy or anything like that, because it wasn't relatively big to really work with, so I just like kept it nice and simple. But yeah, moving on to the first bedroom, which is on the first floor, we kept it relatively simple as well, primarily because we don't really have a lot of space to work with, and I want it to be quite cohesive with like the rest of the floor in terms of like the design as well as like the colors. So we went with a lot of like wood tones as well as like a lot of like nice blue colors that I feel like matched really well with the rest of the house. And since this particular bedroom had a lot of like scenic views and a lot of open window area, I didn't want to clutter it up too much, and I wanted to leave it open just to make it look a bit more like realistic in my opinion. And we're also utilizing one of the wardrobes that sort of like blend in into the walls, but I really wanted to make this room as clutter free possible because I wanted to keep that like nice, simple and minimalistic vibe that I was sort of like going for throughout like the entire build. Moving on to the ensuite of this bedroom, we kept it relatively simple and it kind of has like the same design as the main bathroom. The only difference is since it's a little bit more wider, I was able to add a stool as well as like a nice shower unit towards like the back of the bathroom because I just didn't want to leave it empty in my opinion, and I just felt like it looked a lot more better, and it kind of just like added to the realism because I feel like a lot of wider bathrooms do have a bathroom as well as like a shower, so I just felt like it was kind of like necessary to incorporate that. But yeah, besides that, the design stays relatively the same, especially with like that very nice like window that we have going throughout like the main bathroom. But yeah, I'm just going around and adding some extra details and stuff here and there for like the walls, such as like the sconces and stuff that came from Dream Home Decorator, which I really do like, and I actually utilize that throughout like the entire build, mainly because we kind of like got rid of like the saucer lights that we had throughout like the entire build, so there was less light around like the entire build. So instead I went around and added a bunch of sconces if I needed to, just to avoid like having any like lighting issues, to make sure like no room was like left really dark. There was this 1x4 tiled room, which is kind of like what happens when you focus on the exterior rather than the interior first, but I didn't want to leave this empty, nor did I want to get rid of it, because there was a window there and I couldn't really get rid of the window because it kind of like made the exterior of the actual like build look a bit more interesting, because if I remove that, it was just going to be like a plain white wall and I didn't want that. So instead I utilized it as like some sort of like walk-in wardrobe sort of situation, and I also placed a mirror on the opposite side of it, which I thought like turned out pretty great in the end in my opinion. And I feel like it's a great way of utilizing these like really small spaces rather than like leaving them all empty and closed off, if that makes sense. But yeah, I just feel like it's something unique in my opinion. I feel like I don't really mind it in the end. But yeah, this is the second bedroom that we have, and this is actually on the second floor, and I feel like I really like this bedroom in particular, mainly because it's kind of like a main ensuite to me in my opinion, mainly because it kind of has like that access towards like the exterior balcony sort of area, which is kind of like private, and it also has its own ensuite as well as like that small little like nook area where they can go to like dress up and stuff like that, which I feel like looked quite interesting in my opinion. And I wanted to create this like sort of like extravagant, like over the top sort of like pendant lights like that hang from either side of like the bedside table, but that didn't really end up working out, so I just resorted to using something a lot more simpler, and I didn't really want to go with that black theme that I was going with originally, so I went with a lot more like neutral color tones, such as like that nice white and gray, or like these like nice beige colors, rather than keeping it all like black, because I feel like a lot of the exterior is already like very dark and stuff in certain areas, and I didn't want to make the interiors dark either. So instead I had like certain accents within the entire bedroom that had a bit more like dark features, but not the bed itself, because I feel like the bed itself being dark really does make the entire room look a bit too dark than it really needs to be in my opinion. But yeah, I'm really happy with like the overall look of it, and I feel like it really does look great. And I wanted to incorporate a TV here, despite me not really liking TVs in like these like hotel resort sort of like areas. I feel like it kind of like made sense in this one in particular, because I feel like this house is relatively luxurious and it's really futuristic looking, so I wanted to incorporate that into this build. But yeah, this is one of their en-suites for the master bedroom, and it's not really special or anything like that. It kind of has like the same design and style with the other bathrooms as well, because I kind of just wanted to keep them like cohesive, because there's nothing really special to add in these bathrooms in my opinion, besides like a few paintings and stuff like that. So I kept it relatively nice and simple in like my nice simple like favorite style, which is utilizing that very nice like bathtub, and just like, yeah, just keeping it very nice and simple with like these like plain colors, rather than utilizing too many colors that I feel like would have clashed, especially like for bathrooms. So instead I kept pretty much every single bathroom relatively similar, nice and simple with like these like very nice tiles, which I feel like look quite luxurious in my opinion. And we're moving on to the final bedroom, which is relatively small as well, but I just feel like it looks really nice and simple. We're kind of going for like a more white and like beigey sort of color scheme for this bedroom, but I tried to make this bedroom look as interesting as possible despite having simple colors such as like white and beige. So instead, the way I did that was by utilizing specific like objects and stuff that had different materials and designs. So in particular, like this bed, which has like a lot of like detailing on the duvet, and like the bedside table, each having like their own different like lighting fixtures, whereas like one is like an actual like light stand, whereas like the other one is more of like a candle, like incense sort of like tray table sort of thing, which I thought looked kind of like interesting and kind of like broke the illusion of having everything like be like very simple and perfect, if that makes sense. And we also have a very nice like small simple ensuite for this bedroom as well, which is nothing too special or simple. It also has like own very nice like huge window that like looks out towards like the scenic views from the other side of the entire home, which I really do like the way it looks. And I also incorporated a very nice like sort of like seating area into this bedroom because I just felt like it looked really nice, and since we had the space, I was just like, you know what, why not, might as well just incorporate it into this bedroom, because I just felt like it looked nice overall. And I actually didn't include a desk into this build, but before I upload it onto the gallery, I'll make sure to incorporate some sort of like desk into this build, just so like if you guys are planning to use this home in particular as like an actual home rather than like some sort of like luxury resort, you guys can definitely have like some sort of area designated to like actually like working on the laptops or computers, if that makes sense. But yeah, I'm just going around like the entire build now, just adding some extra clutter and stuff here and there, some extra foliage and stuff. And I also incorporated a very nice like outdoor dining area sort of situation on the side of the home, which is like below the shade. And I really do like the way this looked and turned out in the end, because I just feel like it looks really realistic, and it's something that a luxurious resort like this would probably have on the exterior of their houses. And I also included some nice sun lounges as well as like some shades around like the entire area. And I also went around and added some like extra lighting and stuff so that it looks really nice in the nighttime as well. And yeah, that seems to be it for this entire speed build. Let me know what you guys think by leaving a like and subscribing, and I'll also love to know your thoughts on this build in the comment section below. And I also have a bunch more videos on my channel that I highly recommend that you guys should check out, and I'll see you guys in my next video.